I get it. You've probably spent a few evenings scrolling through endless specs, trying to figure out whether splurging on a high-end gaming rig is worth it for your own setup. You don't want to drop a few $1,000s on a tower that ends up gathering dust because it can't handle the games you love, or worse, because it's a noisy monster that makes your whole room feel like a data center. You need something that actually fits into your daily life, not just a brag-worthy billboard. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's talk about the Asus ROG G7, specifically the G700TFPS766 model that ships with an Intel Core Ultra 7265F, an RTX 5060 with 8GB of GDDR7, 32GB of RAM and a 1TB NVMe SSD. This isn't a just any desktop from the shelf, it's a pre-built machine that tries to balance raw power with the kind of practical ergonomics the average gamer actually cares about. First off, who should even consider this box? If you're the type of player who spends weekends diving into titles that push the envelope, think Cyberpunk 2077 on ultra settings, Flight Simulator, or the latest ray-traced RPGs, this system gives you enough horsepower to stay above 60 frames per second at 1080p and even decent 1440p performance. The RTX 5060 isn't the top-of-the-line card, but with GDDR7 memory it handles modern textures and DLSS 3 fairly well, meaning you can crank up visual fidelity without sacrificing smoothness. The 32GB of RAM eliminates bottlenecks in memory-intensive situations, such as large open-world maps or when you're running background streaming software while you game. If you plan to stream your sessions on Twitch or YouTube, the combination of a solid CPU and that much RAM makes multitasking less of a headache. On the flip side, if you're a casual player who mainly sticks to indie titles, 2D platformers, or older games that barely tax a mid-range GPU, you'll probably be paying for horsepower you'll never fully tap. Likewise, if you're strictly looking for a 4K gaming experience, the RTX 5060 will start to show its limits. Frame rates will dip in the most demanding titles, and you may need to dial down settings or rely heavily on DLSS to maintain smooth play. For those cases, a higher-tier GPU like the RTX 3070 or 4080 would be a better match, albeit at a higher price point. Now, let's dig into the practical strengths. The first thing most owners will notice is the relatively compact form factor given what's inside. Asus has managed to fit a 600W 80+ gold PSU into a chassis that isn't exactly a laptop, but also doesn't dominate the floor. The 600W rating means the system can comfortably power the RTX 5060, the B860 chipset motherboard, and the array of drives without constantly flirting with its power ceiling. In real-world use, I've run stress tests on similar builds and seen the supply stay cool enough that the fans only kick up modestly, so you won't be living with a constant whine even during long gaming sessions. Thermal performance is another area where this rig shines. The ROG series usually leans on Asus's proprietary cooling solution, and this model is no exception. The case houses a dual intake, dual exhaust configuration that directs cool air over the GPU and the CPU while extracting hot air efficiently. In practice, during a 2-hour stretch of intensive gaming, temperatures tend to linger in the low 70s Celsius range for the GPU and high 60s for the CPU, hot enough to be efficient, but not so hot that you'd worry about thermal throttling. This also means you can keep the fans at a relatively low speed, which translates to a quieter room ambience, something that matters when you're trying to hear in-game audio cues or when you stream and have a mic nearby. The 1TB NVMe SSD is another hidden gem for daily usability. Games load faster, and you won't hit a wall when you start juggling multiple titles and large patches. For someone who likes to keep a library of modern releases installed at once, the SSD gives you room to breathe without resorting to external drives that add latency. Plus, with the 32GB RAM buffer, you'll notice shorter load times when switching between games or when resuming from a paused session, compared to a system with 16GB or less. That said, there are a few practical trade-offs you need to be aware of. The first is upgradability. While the internal layout is tidy, the case's dimensions and the PSU's limited headroom leave little breathing room for a future GPU upgrade beyond the RTX 5060 Ti. If you decide a year from now that you want to jump to a 4060T or higher, you might find the 600W supply struggling, or you'll need to replace the power supply entirely, which is an extra cost that isn't built into the original price. Also, the motherboard's B860 chipset isn't the most feature-rich when it comes to expansion slots. You get a decent amount of USB ports, but you'll only have a couple of PCIe lanes for additional cards, so adding a capture card for high-quality streaming or an extra NVMe drive could be constrained.